Hello, and welcome to Placebo, the podcast where we take turns teaching each other something new about healthcare or medicine. I'm Kaylin Richards, and this is my brother.
And I'm Logan Richards.
And hello, brother.
Hello.
Hello. I feel like maybe you should be doing this topic, so I hope I'm not stealing it from you.
Why do you feel that way?
Well, it's to do with something that you did, not me.
Okay.
Okay. So recently, as our listeners may or may not be aware, you were in Europe.
I was. That is correct.
We did record an episode while we were apart.
It didn't sound very good.
So they may remember that not good sounding episode. And you were in Amsterdam for part of that time.
I was. That is correct.
Yes. So both you and our mom, who you were with there, mentioned to me about how there are so many more people riding bikes in Amsterdam, which I think is pretty well known.
Yes.
That it's a big bike riding city.
Lots of bikes.
And that people there do not wear helmets.
No helmets.
No helmets.
There's no helmets in existence in Amsterdam.
They don't even sell them there?
I think you might have had to wear a helmet if you were on a scooter.
Like a motorized scooter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not on bikes.
Not a razor scooter.
There's no bike helmets.
Yeah. So both you and our mom mentioned wondering, is there like a associated greater head injury? Is there a problem with this? Why are people not wearing helmets? What's the deal?
Yeah.
Because we're in Seattle and most people wear helmets. There are some people that don't, but the majority of people wear helmets.
Well, and it's the law to wear a helmet here.
Because it's the law to wear a helmet. Right. So what we're going to look at today are kind of what does the research show as far as do helmets actually help, because there are people that would argue that they don't and that there are other things that are more important in preventing injuries for bicyclists. And then maybe looking a little bit about specifically like the Netherlands, what's going on there.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about it.
So first, I want to look at a study that came out of NYU in 2015.
Okay.
So since it came out of NYU, it's looking at bicycling in New York.
I would assume.
Okay. And they're looking at type and severity of bike injury in bike riders that have been in accidents.
Okay.
Okay, so they looked at all the people that came into the Bellevue Hospital emergency department from 2012 to 2014 within 24 hours of a bike accident.
All right.
Okay. It's not as many people as I would have thought. It was 699 people.
For a whole year?
For 2 years. It's one hospital in New York, but it's a big hospital.
That's like one a day, right?
I guess.
And there's probably a ton of hospitals in New York.
There's probably, yes, 2,000 at least.
That seems reasonable.
Okay. So to start out this article, I guess, the researchers talked a little bit about the changes that New York has been making to hopefully make their city safer.
Yeah.
Including
for
like...
For bikers or for everyone?
For bikers, but...
Okay.
For everyone who
everyone
might bike.
Sure.
So they like have been increasing their number of bike lanes, like along the side of roads, and also specific like bike paths that are separate that vehicles are not up next to.
Right, yeah.
I'm curious, when you were in Amsterdam, was there a lot of bike lanes, bike paths, or people just on the side of the road?
Well, from what we could tell, if it was a main road, on either side of the main road, there was both a sidewalk and a biking area that were completely off the road.
With like a median between them, or just like painted lines?
Between the road or the sidewalk?
Between the road and the bike path.
So it would be this, I think it was like a curb, and sometimes maybe there would be some grass or something. But imagine a sidewalk next to any road here in America.
Kind of a curb.
There's definitely some type of division. It's not you're not walking on the shoulder of the road or anything.
Okay.
So
because a lot of bike lanes here are just painted.
No, yeah, so it's nothing like that. Imagine it's like a bike trail and a sidewalk right next to each other, and then there's some type of division, whether that just be a curb or maybe a median that has some grass or something in between the actual road. We read when we first went there that locals in Amsterdam love to hit tourists who are walking in the bike lanes because there's a very clear, like, it's not it looks like just a big sidewalk. There's usually a line or like two different types of pavement or something to delineate the sidewalk from the bike lane.
Don't walk in the bike lane.
Yeah, but it's very hard to walk in the bike lane because there's so many bikes. It's very easy to see where the bikes are going.
You wouldn't really miss it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so major roads all have these sidewalks that are just for bikes, basically. Smaller roads didn't, but a lot of smaller roads didn't even have sidewalks, it seemed like. So
the bikes and the cars would be kind of mixed.
Smaller roads are probably similar, but the road in Amsterdam is nothing like the road here. Like a small road here, you might still have cars going 25 miles an hour or something.
Yeah.
And there it's not that way. It's such a smaller space that cars are going slower and there's much fewer of them. I don't know how to describe it. But riding a bike in Amsterdam is nothing like riding a bike here.
So that's part of the difficulty in comparing things, as we'll see.
Right.
That's interesting to hear. So I'm not sure. New York is probably nothing like Amsterdam, even though they have their bike lanes and bike paths.
But there's like a billion more cars in New York.
A ton of cars. And I think part of what they've been trying to do is have more education and better traffic management to help with bike safety as well. Because one thing that I saw in an article was that in the Netherlands, people grow up biking from a very early age on roads in traffic. That's not the case here in the U.S. a lot of the time.
And the traffic in the Netherlands, too, is mostly people and other bikes.
Yeah, so...
and hardly cars.
So they have a lot better understanding of, as a bicyclist, of what's needed to be safe before they ever become a driver of a car.
Yeah.
So there's more awareness is what I've been reading.
That makes sense.
So we're going to go back to New York for a little bit for now.
Okay,
so there are a lot of injuries related to biking in New York. So, for example, in 2013, there were about 4,300 bicycle-related injuries that were reported.
What do you think that is versus like an overall percentage of maybe
of population or
maybe
bicyclists?
Like riders versus injuries or bike trips versus injuries?
I don't know. I don't know if that's even known. Trips versus injuries.
It's probably not, but I've always wondered that, like, because that's a big number, and obviously we want to get it down. But I have always wondered, like, is that only like 1%, which in the grand scheme of things is not very much. 1% of bike trips results in an injury. Mm-hmm. That's still more than you'd want, but I always wonder that, when you just hear the number, it's hard to know what that means.
That's very true, and I don't have the other information that would make it more meaningful, I guess.
Yeah.
Head injury was the leading cause, though, of death or permanent disability with bike-related crashes, and in particular, TBI was about a third of the bike-related emergency room visits.
Traumatic brain injury,
which is a serious thing that can, depending on the severity of a traumatic brain injury, that can affect your ability to work, to live independently, to function as an independent person.
It sounds like you're hinting at the importance of helmets.
Okay. So in this New York study, of the 699 people that came to the ED in between 2012 and 2014, they found that 39.1% were wearing helmets.
Which is not a huge number.
Not a huge number.
I would argue that would... Well, I don't know. If you were to look at a random population of bicyclists in Seattle, I would say the percentage of people wearing helmets is much higher than that.
Yes.
But this, of course, is not that percentage. This is the percentage of people who got hurt on their bikes.
Now, yes. Now, in New York, the laws are different.
Okay.
So I think you have to wear... In New York, the law is that you have to wear a bike helmet if you're under 15, maybe. And if you're a commercial... like you're a courier or something, like you're working.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're an adult biking to work, biking for fun, you don't have to wear a helmet.
Okay. Well, then maybe that number seems fine.
So 79.9% of these people were men.
Well, that's never surprising.
That were injured. So, yeah.
It's always the men getting more injured.
Yeah. The men are more injured because maybe they're taking more risky behaviors. Most of these injuries did not occur in crashes with other bikes or with pedestrians. It was all with cars for the more severe injuries. A couple other things. The people that were wearing helmets, the 39% that were wearing helmets, were also much more likely to be in bike lanes or paths versus on the street. they were more likely to be following traffic laws when their accident occurred versus not.
Yeah.
And they were less likely to have been either drinking or using technology such as a phone or
Is this all
texting.
based on like self-report after they get to the hospital, or?
This is, well, self-report was their backup if they didn't have other information, but they also used witness reports and police reports.
Okay.
And, I don't imagine you would say you were using your phone if you weren't using your phone. Like, yeah, I was texting and I wasn't. Like,
Well, they've
seems
had,
like it'd be underreported versus overreported.
they've had TBIs. Who knows if we can report if any of their information
That's
is
true.
correct.
So they did have other information besides self-report.
Okay, good.
So the injury results are what you would expect. The people that had helmets on had much less or less severe head injury than the people that were not wearing helmets.
Right.
Okay, so in non-helmeted riders, the incidence of any type of intracranial injury was about 20%. And in people that were wearing helmets, it was about 6%.
So much less.
Much
probably.
less, yes.
Yeah.
Also, the people that were wearing helmets were 72% less likely to get a TBI in an accident compared with the unhelmeted bicyclist.
Suppose that's not surprising, right?
No.
If the helmets are designed the way they're supposed to, they should
Yeah.
theoretically protect your head from injury.
Yes. Now, there are people that would, again, disagree with these results, which surprises me. So, or which surprised me when I did the research.
Are you going to talk about that later?
Yes.
Or should I ask now?
I'll talk about it later because I have another study that kind of goes into a little bit more.
Okay.
So the conclusions of this New York study was that despite a safer urban environment, despite the changes they'd made with their traffic flow, with their infrastructure, with their laws, helmets continue to be an essential step in preventing or lessening head injury. The environment is not such that they are irrelevant.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, good. I'm glad
mean,
it does.
it
It doesn't to everybody.
It is New York.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds like a lot of people ride on the roads. And
Yeah,
I haven't been to New York, but I've seen pictures of all
I
the...
have. It's pretty
All the
busy.
cars.
I would not want to ride a bike there unless I was
Yeah.
on a bike path.
Now, do they have... I know in Seattle we've just started putting in... I don't know what they're calling them like cycle tracks or something.
What's that?
It's basically like it's on the road. So the one I can think of now that's recently been put in is like, it's one on Roosevelt and Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
So these are shoulder areas of the road where they've put a type of median in, but it's
like a
basically like a
Curb
bike
kind
path.
of thing, yeah.
It's not really on the sidewalk, but
It's on the
kind of
road,
like,
but there's like a median
kind of like what I was describing in Amsterdam, except this is like on one side of the road and it has both directions of
for the
bicycling.
bikes. Yeah.
In Amsterdam, it was only a one direction, and they were on the side of the road that was going that direction.
And then it'd be the other direction.
on the other
Yeah.
side of the road. So yeah, these are sort of like that, but I wonder if they have those in New York, because I know,
I don't
our
recall
city is
seeing
only
that,
just
but-
starting to put those in.
I don't recall seeing anything like that, but I wasn't looking for it when I was there. So
Yeah. I've always wondered if those are safer too, because I would think one of the, most exposed times as a biker is intersections.
Yes.
And if you're on a cycle track, you're not really any safer at an intersection. You still have to
Yeah.
go through it,
Yeah.
So I don't know about that either.
Especially making turns at intersections when
Right.
you're, So now that we've kind of talked about some research, which is like helmets in an urban environment,
Okay.
I want to go back to our original kind of question, which is looking at the Netherlands
Right.
compared to another area where
Yeah,
helmets are much more common.
We want to know if there's more injury in the Netherlands because they don't wear helmets there.
Yeah.
Right.
So I found a great study
Okay.
that just looks at this question. Um,
Perfect.
Comparison of the serious injury pattern of adult bicyclists between Southwest Netherlands and the state of Victoria, Australia, 2001 to 2009.
Oh, well, I know nothing about Victoria, Australia.
Well, we're going to learn some about it.
Okay.
So this was a collaborative study between researchers in Australia, and in Melbourne, Australia, and Rotterdam, the Netherlands.
Okay.
And then,
Which is not Amsterdam. we
No,
should
it is
say.
the second biggest city in the Netherlands, I found out.
So we have no personal experience in this city.
No. But it may
Do you
be
think
somewhat
it's the same?
somewhat similar based on what I'm reading in this study.
Most of Amsterdam or the Netherlands is very flat.
Very flat,
I
so
would
biking
imagine
is
that.
therefore popular.
Yeah.
So there was, researchers here from the Netherlands, from Melbourne, and randomly one person from Baltimore and one person from South Africa, Cape Town.
They just wanted a worldly approach.
They wanted to join in and help.
Okay.
So this study was kind of trying to compare similar cohorts of patients from these two different geographic areas. So trying to make the main difference between them just the fact that they're from different geographic areas versus other things. So they studied people. This study was from, as I said, Rotterdam and Melbourne, and those are both the second largest city in their respective countries.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if that's the way that we're going for, but
funny.
They surveyed data from both level 1 trauma centers in those cities.
Oh, is that a designation, the level 1 trauma center that's worldwide?
It may be.
I've always heard that.
Because they talked about how data is collected and stored in these level 1 trauma centers, and that is a standardized worldwide
I didn't know that.
thing. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because we've always heard of level 1 trauma centers here, but
Yes.
I just assumed that was a United States designation.
I don't think it is.
Cool.
Yeah. So basically they're taking hospital records again, kind of like our first study of people brought into the hospital with bike accidents.
Okay.
And just comparing the rate and types of injury and whether or not they were wearing a helmet and kind of all the same factors.
All right.
Okay. So who do you think had more severe head injuries?
Well, I don't know anything about Victoria or
Oh, I'll tell you. In
Melbourne.
Australia, there's a mandatory helmet law.
Okay, so all of them, well, let's say a large percentage of the people in Australia are probably wearing helmets.
Yes, that is true.
And a large percentage of the people in Rotterdam are likely not wearing helmets.
Various studies for the prevalence of helmet wearing in Amsterdam have been from 0.1% to 5% helmet wearing, and in Australia, 70 to 90% helmet wearing.
Okay. Well, I guess I would have to guess, knowing nothing else,
Yes.
and ignoring my feelings for the safety of biking while I was in Amsterdam.
Sure.
I guess I would say there'd be more head injuries in the population from the Netherlands.
Yeah. It is very true. Now, so they had more severe head injuries and a higher mortality rate, but the Australian population had more chest, abdomen, and extremity injuries. So you think that those would not be changed in Amsterdam, or not Amsterdam, Rotterdam, because, I mean, they're not protected either way. Yeah. So one thing I'm wondering...
It's not like if you don't get injured in the head, you have to get injured somewhere else.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So they didn't really give a reason for that.
Just be an anomaly in the numbers. I don't know.
It could be. It was interesting to me. My question was about bike paths. Why I asked you about bike paths and bike lanes in Amsterdam is that the rates of bike accidents with a car versus with other bikers or with pedestrians or whatever was higher in Rotterdam than it was in Melbourne.
Okay.
So I had thought in my head that they were all using bike paths in the Netherlands, but your point kind of was only on the major streets, maybe.
Yeah. Well, also I've never been to Rotterdam, so
that's true. We don't know what it's like there.
In the major areas in Amsterdam, it was all separated from traffic, unless you were going off into a side road to, go to wherever your destination was. I would say, similar to the way we have large roads and freeways, there was major bike routes that seemed like tons and tons of people were on. Yeah. And then less so on the smaller streets, only if you were going off to a certain
specific place there.
Rotterdam may be completely different.
Did you see a lot of elderly people riding bikes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, this makes sense then. There were a lot more elderly people injured in Rotterdam than in Melbourne.
Everyone rides bikes.
Okay.
Kids, and it was usually like parents with like 3 or 4 kids on their bike somehow with like attached chairs and trailers.
I was going to say that sounds like terrible to ride.
Older
but
people.
I think because I'm thinking of here where there's all these hills. On flat, it's probably not very hard to ride with 3 kids.
Yeah. It's very leisurely. I'm not surprised that everyone does it.
The study also mentioned that in Australia, people typically wear special clothing for biking. It's more of a thing that you're doing versus in the Netherlands, it's more of I'm going to the store and this is what I'm doing.
Well, you see that here too, where, in America, at least in Seattle, people dress up in their bike clothes and they have, the only bike they have might be their fancy road bike or whatever, where they need to wear certain shoes and
clip-on shoes.
Right. And so that's, I've heard that sentiment before too, where
You wear your fancy padded bike,
like,
spandex shorts.
yeah,
and-
Americans
yeah.
have to dress up to ride their bike, where in Europeans it's very much not like that, where they just use it as a mode of transportation.
So you're just wearing your normal work clothes or
Right.
whatever if you're
So
going
just
to work.
wearing whatever you're wearing,
Yeah.
which is definitely the way.
Which I asked you before, what do they do in the rain? Or like if you're going to work?
They
I
just
don't-
wear rain jackets. We asked the.
What about your pants?
We asked the man who owned the hotel that we stayed at, and he said, "Well, yeah, it snows in the winter." And he said, "Yeah, people just ride their bikes." He said,
Do they have studded tires?
He showed us. Well, no, he said usually. I mean, I don't think it sounds like a crazy mountain town or whatever. But he said he showed us pictures of people riding their bikes, and there was snow flying out from the tires, and the people were just in rain jackets and pants, and
That seems
it was just as
very
busy.
cold.
So the bike traffic does not slow down, dependent on
for the weather. It's very interesting. So yeah, I'll get back to my statistics here. Yeah, a lot more elderly people were injured in the Netherlands than in Melbourne, but probably that's because they're just more elderly people riding bikes.
Yeah,
Because that's their transportation.
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. Some limitations of this study and the study design, I guess, is that because they're using hospital records, they're only getting people that are injured enough to come to the hospital. There's a large population that probably didn't come to the hospital that had more minor injuries.
Right.
Which
that
can
makes
kind of
sense.
skew the results, maybe.
Certainly.
And
But not if we're only looking at major injuries, I guess.
yeah, if that's the point of the study.
Yeah.
And then also the biking culture, as we've been talking about, is very different between these two places. I think
Right.
from what I'm getting from this article, the culture in Melbourne is more similar to what it is here as far as biking.
Certainly seems that way.
It's like a recreational activity. You wear your biking clothes. It's a much lower percentage. It's not your normal transportation for most people.
And even the people that do commute here, I mean, obviously I don't know
Yeah.
these numbers, but, I commute on my bike sometimes, and most of the people that I see commuting are still wearing, like, bike clothes.
Oh,
and
yeah,
stuff.
because like our dad bikes to work in his
Right.
bike clothes, in his
So it's
specific-
not just like
yeah.
you wear your work clothes but I think a lot of that, too, is because a commute to work here is a workout because there's so many hills.
Yeah.
And a commute to work in Amsterdam is not a workout.
It's not.
Depending
Like,
on even
people
if you
would be
go
super
really far.
sweaty and gross if they weren't
Yeah.
going into work. In
It's
their
like
work clothes.
a leisurely stroll, maybe.
That's nice.
Yeah.
One thing that was noted in the article too, talking about Australia, was that they have bike lanes, separate lanes alongside of the marked out alongside of the road, including along their highways, which have speeds up to, it said, like 100 kilometers per hour, which is like 60-ish miles an hour, right?
Well, yeah, it's similar.
And that
But-
seems like that would be a high risk for injury, depending on the type of barrier between them.
Yeah, but that's allowed on I-90, which is a freeway that goes from Seattle to Boston. You can ride your bike on I-90 the whole way.
Well, what is the barrier along the side?
It's not. It's just a
Really?
shoulder. Yeah.
Really? You
That's
can
the
ride your
thing.
bike through there?
People do that. You can,
I've seen people on the bridge, but I thought that was just the bridge.
No, that's different. That's an actual bike path along
Yeah.
the bridge. No, you can ride your bike on I-90 all the way from Seattle to Boston on the
That
shoulder
would not
of the
be a really
freeway.
pleasant bike ride. Maybe
It's
that's
legal.
why people don't do it, though.
Well,
I've
I
never
think-
seen people doing that.
Yeah, I think you have to be doing it for a reason, probably, but
That would be a terrible bike ride.
I'm almost certain that that's legal, and I have seen several people, like when I'm driving up to the mountains, that are biking along the freeway.
Interesting. So
It's not common.
it's not common, no. But the other point of this article then was that in the Netherlands, there are not usually high speed. The cars are not going high speed where they're mixed in with the bike riders, which is something that you also,
Right, yeah.
which I think kind of contributes to people's feeling there that they're in less danger when biking.
The city is so crowded with people and bikes there that the cars literally can't go fast. I remember on riding bikes, we crossed the busiest road in Amsterdam, according to our bike tour guide.
Sure.
And it was like a 4-lane road that had like a couple cars coming. And I was like, you wouldn't even notice that road in America. It'd be like a small country road.
Yeah. So I want to finish up here by talking about this last article. Barriers to bicycle helmet use among Dutch pediatricians.
What does that mean?
Okay.
That means Dutch pediatricians don't want children to use helmets?
Yes-ish.
Okay.
So this was a survey done by attendants at the a conference, the annual conference for the Dutch Pediatric Society in 2006.
Of course.
And they were surveyed about their how often they ride bikes, do they use helmets? If they don't, why not?
This is the doctors themselves.
This is the doctors.
Okay.
Do they tell their own children to use a helmet? Do they think that helmets should be promoted or legislated for? Do they encourage their patients to use helmets? So their thought is maybe the reason that people in the Netherlands don't wear helmets is because they don't ever start out and there's no culture of wearing helmets.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay. So they had 258 people respond, and of those respondents, 96% ride a bicycle.
Yes.
So
That's about right.
when they are cycling for transportation, 94% never wear a helmet. 2% always wear a helmet. And I guess other percents are
We didn't
sometimes.
see those people.
That's what Mom said when I told this to her, too. When cycling for recreation, 70% never wear a helmet and 18% always wear it. I find that interesting.
Does that mean like working out?
Maybe, or maybe going on a longer ride in the countryside or something. I don't know what the difference is there versus biking to work.
We didn't ride out of the country, but I will say...
You didn't ride out of the country? Out of the
into
city?
the country. We didn't ride out of the country. One thing that was interesting, so we took a bus from, Amsterdam, the city itself, to the airport.
Yeah.
And I remember the bus ride being like 45 minutes, but then when we got to the airport, there was an area for like a big parking lot outside of the airport, as well as one closer to the airport, and both of them had these huge bike cage areas with like 3 layers of bikes so people obviously were riding their bikes to the airport and leaving them there like long term while they were gone.
So you're biking with your luggage to the airport?
Thousands of bikes, because they had like these cages that were like 3 levels of racks, so you could have stacks on stacks of bikes.
Stacks on stacks?
And it was like that, we
That's
saw...
the thing about money?
Yeah, probably about money. We saw that too at the train station. Same thing, where there was these kind of cages and areas where you could keep your bikes, and just thousands and thousands of them.
How do you find your bike again? Do you have a ticket with your number on it?
You remember where you left it, I guess. I don't know. We didn't do that.
I'm surprised people are biking to the airport, because I would think they'd have luggage that would be awkward to bike with.
See, I don't know if people are biking from Amsterdam to the airport or if there's closer cities.
Even if you're coming from a closer city.
But it does seem like people even do that kind of thing, like would bike from the city to the airport with their stuff and then leave their bikes, just like you would leave your car at the airport.
I'm sure it's cheaper to park your bike. Right? Yeah. All right. So back to our Dutch pediatricians. Yeah. So we talked about how a lot of them are not wearing helmets.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think they might have said they don't wear helmets?
I guess my best guess is that Amsterdam's whole culture and environment is we do what we want and other people don't tell us what to do. Uh-huh. I think that has something to do with it.
So maybe this response, nobody uses a helmet in the Netherlands? That was 26% of responders said that.
Yeah, I guess. And this is maybe more to the why there's no law for it, I think, is the same reason that there's no laws for other things. That it sounded like a lot of the laws in Amsterdam are just kind of like, well, if you're doing something, we just won't pay attention to it, even if the rest of the world thinks it's illegal, So maybe that's part of it, too.
So this was a bit surprising to me. The highest response, 40% of responders said this was the reason they didn't wear a helmet. I have never thought of wearing a helmet. Like, it just didn't occur to them, which was kind of why my question to you is, like, do they not even sell them there? Maybe it's just not even within their experience. They never have thought of it.
We rented bikes, which I'm sure you've gathered by now that we rode bikes in the city.
Yeah.
And
well, I knew that.
If you were to rent a bike in America, imagine the legal ramifications of not giving a renter a helmet, and then that renter getting hurt, especially in the head. Like I can't even think. Like that would be a huge story, and the place would probably close down. And so, but of course, we rented bikes. The only talk of safety that we got was we were told the Dutch word that is said when someone's coming around, passing you. Or there was just some kind of like noise that they yelled, like, hey, or obviously there were bells too. They said if you hear bells, they're probably being rung at you, so go off to the side. So that was the only safety talk that we had. Like nothing about like, oh, we're riding on the streets, like watch out for cars.
Stay in a line, whatever.
And obviously there were no helmets in the in the building at all. We
Yeah.
just walked in there, grabbed a bike. It was never talk of helmets. No one asked for helmets. No one said, notice you're not wearing helmets.
I would say here in the United States, even so, I think it's state by state laws as far as helmet regulations, and even in states where it's not required for everybody, I think everywhere pretty much is required for children.
Yeah.
That I know of.
I just can't even imagine the legal issues for a company that's
At
giving
a minimum,
people bikes.
yeah.
You have to do everything to be safe for your customers, right?
Yeah. So here are the other reasons why they did not wear helmets, these Dutch pediatricians.
Okay.
They didn't think of it, number one. That was by far the highest. That was 40%, like I said. The next one is poor appearance. That's 28%.
I'd buy that.
And then 26% is the one I already said. Again, nobody uses a helmet in the Netherlands.
That's true.
And 22%, a helmet is uncomfortable. Which, I mean, it's not the same as not wearing a helmet, but it's not like it hurts your head or something if it's fitting.
I guess maybe they haven't found one that fits.
I mean,
but if no one's selling good helmets in the country, how are they supposed to find a good helmet that fits and
maybe
looks
this is the
nice?
problem.
Because no one wants to sell helmets in the country.
Those are the highest. There are other response rates that are lower. 12% said the risk of getting in an accident is so low. 11%
Do we
said...
actually have the risk yet? Have you told me the risk of getting an accident in the Netherlands?
So I didn't find an actual number that is like, this is the percentage of people that will be in an accident.
We just saw that compared to Melbourne, there's more head injuries.
So compared to Melbourne, there are a lot more head injuries. Also, studies have shown that, in general, helmets prevent head injuries in a variety of places, including this New York City study. So,
was there more injuries total, or like percentage of the population? Or
there were.
Did we get?
Well,
to
it
that?
wouldn't be total because the population is so much smaller than.
Right. Is Melbourne bigger or?
Melbourne is way bigger. Melbourne is like 3.5 million, and
Amsterdam
Rotterdam was like 500,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amsterdam is not a big city either. So.
No. So
we don't know. We still don't know like percentage of like people to or even like bike trips to injuries or anything.
Because I think that's a hard thing to find. Because then you have
Yeah.
to figure how many.
It doesn't
bike
even sound
trips.
like we know that in
No,
America.
I don't think that we do know that because, and like in Amsterdam, probably or Netherlands in general, the bike trips per person are probably much higher than in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's possible to compare or make. The population is so different, the biking culture is so. I don't think it's possible. I think what we're trying to find is, does wearing a helmet make a difference in terms of head injury?
So it seems like one study says yes.
The study in New York says yes. The study comparing the injury rates between a place where helmets are common and a place where they're not says yes.
Okay.
So why are they not worn then in a place where biking is so common? Not thinking of it seems like a really bad excuse when it's common knowledge and used in so many other countries. And as the study with the pediatrician says, like, these pediatricians have like high social, economic, and education levels. They should know about preventative medicine. Why do they not think that helmets are helpful or important?
When you said earlier that some people didn't think helmets were important, is this what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Or are there larger groups advocating against helmets?
Yes, yeah, actually. So in Holland, I don't know about elsewhere.
Okay.
So there is the Dutch Cyclist Union. It's called Fietsersbond. It thinks that campaigns that are promoting helmet use are a waste of money. They think the money should be invested in more effective measures to increase cyclist safety. Like, they think that cyclist safety is important. They just think helmets are a waste of money, and that other things such as better traffic management and better infrastructure are much more effective. That has not been shown by studies. Even in places with good infrastructure, head injury continues to be a major problem.
Well, I don't know. For one, I think I really have yet to see a place that has good infrastructure for biking.
Even in Amsterdam, as you're saying.
Even Amsterdam, probably the best, but I think that's only because of the sheer number of people biking. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that's, honestly, now that you're saying that, I've never thought of this before, but I don't feel like their argument is ridiculous. I think that, like, we see the same thing with football helmets, where, especially when they started, there was some, I don't remember the exact numbers here, but there was some increase in head injury, and it had to do partially because people started using their heads as...
Because they had the helmet.
Yeah, well, and it's the same thing as like maybe seatbelts. Like people drive more dangerously with seatbelts.
But I don't think that's the case because
creates false sense of security.
Well, right, but I think that there was that statistic comparing Melbourne and Rotterdam, and that there were more accidents with cars in Rotterdam compared to Amsterdam, or compared to Melbourne, where they are wearing helmets.
Yeah.
So why
the
would
evidence
they be
doesn't seem to suggest it, but I think part of the problem is that the people that don't see the use in helmets, maybe they have a more idealist view of what it's actually like to ride a bike in a city, you know?
Yeah, maybe, but they do.
Well,
they do ride a bike in a city.
I'm thinking like, you know, while I have no evidence to support this because I haven't read it, it makes a lot of sense to me that if the city was designed for both drivers and bikers equally, and that the infrastructure had been studied and made in a way that kept both populations safe.
Sure.
Maybe we wouldn't worry so much about helmets because the incident of accident would be so different. But with the way things are now, especially in American cities, obviously helmets are a good idea because riding your bike is so dangerous. But that's mostly, I think, because you have to interact with cars and traffic, which in a lot of cases are not that happy to see a bike, you know, and are frustrated by it. And in Amsterdam, that's not really the case. Like people aren't, from what I could tell, like drivers weren't, you know, mad at bikers. You know, here, if you ride your bike on a road and maybe you're causing the car behind you to not be able to pass because the opposing, you know, direction has too many cars, so they can't get around you, and they'll start honking and then they'll yell at you when you go by. Yeah. That didn't happen in Amsterdam, even if you were kind of in the way. Because I think people just expect there's more bikes than cars there, you know?
Yeah. Well, bikes have the majority, yeah.
So hard to argue with the evidence that helmets increase safety in these situations that are already unsafe. I wonder what the numbers would be like if we did have this ideal infrastructure situation where maybe biking and driving were of similar safety and convenience.
Perhaps this Dutch Cyclist Union is a bit too idealistic. I feel like they're hoping for an idealistic circumstance like you're describing and saying we should put all our money and resources to doing that. But I think they're not thinking of the world that they live in now, which is not ideal, and why don't protect people now? I think that the other thing, I want to say one more thing about human nature is to always kind of feel like injury happens to someone else and not us.
Yeah, that is true.
You know? So I've worked with enough people with TBIs. I never want to have a TBI. I'm always going to wear a helmet, you know, because it's awful. But I think it's human nature to just think, especially if it's not something that you see regularly, like I
Which
do.
I feel like
that it just doesn't happen. It's certainly not going to happen to me.
It is also, you know, in my opinion, it's rare to actually see a bike accident in the city. You know? I mean, I can't think of the last time I was driving or walking around the city and actually saw a bike accident. Obviously, people do see them because they do happen.
I see them, yes.
I have not seen them very frequently.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Well, not a major one. I can't think of a time I've seen a major bike accident. I know they happen.
I've seen a lot of also near major accidents, too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's you know, tons and tons of those, too.
So one other thing to kind of finish up this article with the pediatricians, they talked about how there have been some campaigns to promote the use of bike helmets in the Netherlands. And they had children participate in like these groups that they were going to wear a helmet. But the participating children had considerable negative reactions from the social environment, is how they put it, which was basically... It says they felt stared at and were laughed at, and a bunch of them just stopped using the helmet because of that.
Yeah.
Which is sad, right? They're trying to do a good thing for themselves.
Weird. It is very weird.
And it's hard to... And, you know, why are you laughing at someone that's trying to do something good for themselves? But kids
because
don't.
In Amsterdam, no one wears a helmet.
Yeah. But why should you care if someone's doing something for themselves that doesn't hurt you?
They're going to face adversity.
Yeah.
I don't know. That is the Amsterdam way. You should be able to do whatever you want without anyone else stopping you.
That is not the case as far as helmet goes, apparently.
Seems.
For a different perspective, this is for the American Academy of Pediatrics. They say that a bike helmet is one of the most effective safety measures that a child can take to prevent injury, and all bicyclists should wear properly fitted bike helmets every time they ride, and that pediatricians should encourage parents to wear a helmet when biking to model safe behavior for their children. So not only do the Dutch pediatricians not wear a helmet themselves, a lot of them didn't recommend that their kids or their patients should be wearing helmets at all.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. I think part of it is just that I would hazard a guess that there's nowhere else on the planet but the Netherlands that has the same culture, setup, everything around biking.
Yeah.
Biking in the Netherlands is nothing probably like biking anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. If they're going to move somewhere else, they need to be cautious.
Maybe. It's very different.
So anyways, that's kind of...
So what's our conclusion with the evidence? So
okay.
We have...
Our evidence has shown that in urban environments, which is where all of the studies focused,
Right.
rates of head injury, and in particular serious head injury, are much higher when you are not wearing a helmet.
So we saw in New York.
In New York.
We also saw in
Rotterdam.
The Rotterdam versus Melbourne study.
Yeah.
Okay. So in those ones, just to clear up, with the major bike injuries, Rotterdam had the most head injuries.
Rotterdam had the most head injuries.
Even though the population was lower, obviously, than New York and Melbourne.
Well, it was a controlled cohort, so they were trying to compare apples to apples as much as possible.
Okay.
They didn't, yeah.
So that was only looking at Melbourne, only versus Melbourne.
Yes.
It looked like percentage-wise or whatever, there was more head injuries.
Yes.
In Rotterdam.
More head injuries and more fatality. However, higher body and arm and leg injuries in Melbourne, so watch out for that.
Because your head is protected. Something else has to get injured. Maybe
this is what you're talking about. They felt more protected because they're wearing a helmet, so they were less safe and therefore injured other parts of their body.
I don't know. This is such a hard topic, too, because just going off the things I see every day, I often see people in our city riding bikes on streets that they have no business riding a bike on. They'll be riding, but there's this major, road going through a neighborhood. And since I ride my bike, I happen to know that one block over, there's a smaller road that has almost no car traffic and that has been designed by the city to make it safer for you to ride your bike on.
Do people just not know about it?
They have stop signs on all the intersection streets of this smaller road. There's speed bumps, so cars on the road can't go as fast. And yet, I still see people every day on the big roads riding their bikes. And it's like, what are you doing?
I think they just don't know.
Why don't you go one block over and ride your bike there? And I see that everywhere. It's like... So that's why this is so hard to me, because I think in these places that are not Amsterdam, there has to be this huge number of people that either I don't know what they're thinking. It's hard for me because, I want to ride my bike as safe as possible. I wear a helmet. I go on the roads that are made for bikes.
I don't know.
Maybe
that's the biking culture, though.
Well, see, that's why I think this is so hard, because it's just like there are these different groups of people that clearly don't have the same opinions about how to ride a bike safely.
Yeah.
And that includes the Netherlands group. But there's these weird divisions of groups here. Because there's so much bike behavior that I see while driving or while biking that I don't understand. That's unsafe. And then even I've seen times where someone is riding their bike on a busy road when they could be one block over on the bike safe road.
Yeah.
One example I'm thinking of specifically, a car was trying to pass a bike and they grazed the biker's shoulder with their side view mirror. Which of course, would
make me really nervous if I was the biker.
Yeah, well, and the biker, which this happens a lot, bikers have this, especially when they're riding on busy roads, they have this defensive mindset. And so he got really mad and starts speeding up and starts banging on the car with his fists as he's driving through. And it's just like, I don't know. Like, I understand that he needs to, obviously, he wants the car to be aware of him. He's upset that...
The car is aware of him now.
He obviously was in a very dangerous, position. If the car had hit him harder and he'd fall, he could have died.
Yeah.
But why don't you just ride on the car safe road?
Yeah, I don't know.
So, because I honestly
Maybe
feel
he
like
doesn't know about
there's
it.
a big group of people like that too, though, that put themselves at greater risk.
Yeah.
That don't need to. And I wonder where all these injuries come from,
Well, yeah. So I'm not saying anything too much about men, but I will say in all of the studies, men were the highest injured group by far.
Man who I was just
70
talking
to
about,
80%. Too. Yeah. So there is definitely a behavioral component because I'm assuming I don't know about everywhere, but there probably are a similar percentage of men and women riding bikes.
Yeah. This is a contentious topic, though. I really don't know because drivers usually don't like bikers on the road, especially in America. Mm-hmm. And it seems like in the place in the world that's most set up for bikes, they want to do whatever, they want to do and not... I also wonder the numbers, like you said, most of these major injuries are car versus bike.
Yes.
So what if there's no cars and only bikes in a city? Are there any head injuries with no helmets?
Well, probably some, but a lot less.
Yeah. But we don't have the data on that, too. And I would argue that...
Well, because there's no cities that are only bikes.
But I would argue that riding in Amsterdam, especially in some parts of the city, is a lot more like riding in a city full of only bikes than it is riding in a mixed city or one...
Well, it's not enough so, though. They're still getting a higher percentage of head injuries.
Well, that was Rotterdam. I don't know how it's different. Well, very interesting. Obviously, I have some opinionated thoughts about it, too.
You do.
Only opinionated because it's confusing to me.
Yeah. I would say the clear part to me is that regardless of all of the other circumstances, wearing a bike helmet helps prevent serious head injury when you're riding a bike.
It certainly seems like that's the case, especially if you're riding your bike in America. And it seems like...
Especially if you're riding where there might be any cars that you might come in contact with. If you're on a closed bike path where there are no cars, it seems like less likely. But still possible.
We don't know. Very interesting. So there's not a lot of good research perhaps for the questions we might want, but there is a lot of research showing that helmets are important.
Yeah. So the other thing that maybe I'll bring up just to finish out is that there were early studies done about helmets in like the 80s. That's when they first started studying that.
Right. And
they found that they were useful. And then there were a lot of changes with the infrastructure, like I've been talking about bike paths and stuff, that didn't exist when those first studies were done. And a lot of people thought that maybe helmets wouldn't be so effective anymore with all the better traffic and infrastructure set up. But they still found that they are.
I would feel like, if the infrastructure was perfect, which of course it will never be.
The world is not perfect.
Then maybe that would be the case. Mm-hmm. But there's always going to be some bike versus car scenario, and the biker doesn't usually win that.
No, that is why they end up in the hospital with a serious head injury,
right,
which you don't want.
Well, very interesting. I'm glad you did this topic. I'm not sure I left with any
wear a helmet.
I'm not sure I had any changed feelings. I was already wearing a helmet every day.
I know. I just can't quite figure out why they don't in Amsterdam, but I guess that's just cultural. That's what I can feel.
I think it's very much so cultural.
All right, so let's wrap it up there.
Okay.
We would be interested maybe to hear from any of our listeners that might have different bike riding experience in different areas.
That would be fun, actually.
Yeah, and hear
perhaps there are other cities similar to Amsterdam or other examples of cool infrastructure that cities are doing for bikes. Or
I noticed we've been having some listeners in Australia. I wonder if they have any more information about the situation there.
Very interesting.
All right. So if you enjoyed the episode, please share us with a friend, or please give us a rate on iTunes. That makes my day.
You can also get in contact with us either on our website, which is placebopodcast.com, or on our Facebook page.
On our website, we also have our show notes. You can check out any of our references there. You forgot what you were supposed to say.
Thank you to James Aiken for our music.
And thank you to you for listening. We'll be back with a new episode next week.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.